Contrary to the belief that addiction is a choice, addiction is actually a family and brain disease, right? A brain disease, obviously, because addiction does not only impact the person that's struggling with substance use disorders, but addiction also impacts the entire family, the people that love that one struggling with substance use disorders. And I think the biggest struggles with minimizing the stigma that revolves around addiction is how do we help educate people who struggle with understanding this, right? How do we educate people who struggle with understanding the fact and studies that have been proven to show that substance use disorders is not a choice, but it's actually a family and a brain disease. And I'm going to provide one strategy for you, right, to give to someone that you may know that's struggling with this concept of addiction not being a choice, because that loved one may be thinking, well, we all have choices in life, and my loved one made the choice to use. And sometimes that transitions to the feelings of the family member, probably feeling like the loved one struggling with substance use disorders maybe has chosen drugs over their children, chosen drugs over their family, and that's just not how it works, right? So I say that to say I'm going to provide one example for you to provide to family members that have an addicted loved one struggling with substance use disorders, and a family member that struggles with understanding the concept that addiction's not a choice. So when I encounter those who actually come to me and struggle with the concept, I ask them a question, right? And I put the question back on them, and I ask, do you feel that diabetes is a choice? And their answer is typically revolving around diabetes is different from addiction. Sometimes they may feel like I'm projecting the actual conversation and issue at hand, their loved one's addiction, versus actually trying to educate them. But I really ask them, is diabetes a choice? And they say no. And then I ask another question, and the second question I ask is nicotine cancer a choice? And they say no. But that's different. And the story I usually tell them is the story about my friend who never liked to eat healthy. He never exercised. And I decided to go up to him one day and I asked him one simple question. And that question was, do you choose to develop diabetes one day? And obviously, his answer was no. Who chooses to develop diabetes one day? And then my follow-up question to him was, do you understand that if you continue to not eat healthy, not exercise, and not prioritize your mental health in your health, do you understand that one of the consequences may be you could develop diabetes? His follow-up answer to that was yes. And I'm here to tell you today, unfortunately, my friend has diabetes. But that's not what the focus point. The focus point is, prior to my friend developing diabetes, I asked him a simple question. Do you choose to have diabetes one day? And his response was simply no. Who chooses to have diabetes one day? You see, the same applies to addiction. In this scenario where I'm explaining my friend and diabetes, see, diabetes wasn't actually the choice in the matter. His choice was actually not to eat healthy or not to exercise. The diabetes, as a result of that, was not his choice. And then sometimes you may have a family member that may be struggling a little bit more, right? We always have family members that have addicted loved ones who may struggle a little bit more with understanding this concept. And then the next question I ask them is about, do you feel like nicotine cancer is a choice? Because I have a friend that I went to him one day because all he does is chain smoke cigarettes. And I decided to go to my friend one day and ask him, do you choose to develop cancer as a result of you chain smoking cigarettes, your excessive nicotine use throughout the years? Do you choose to develop cancer as a result? And his answer in reply was no. Who in their right mind chooses to develop nicotine cancer? My friend today, unfortunately, has nicotine cancer. But that's not the focus. The focus is to keep in mind that I asked him a question prior to him developing that nicotine cancer. And the question I asked him was, do you choose to develop cancer one day? His response was no. Who chooses that for their lives? You see, in this example about the nicotine cancer wasn't my friend's choice in the matter. My friend's choice in the matter was actually to engage in excessive nicotine use. And I want us to apply it to addiction. You see, addiction may not be a choice, but using is. And the reason I say it that way is because a lot of people that come and say that those that feel that addiction is a disease are allowing those who are struggling with addiction to kind of get off and hold them not accountable for their addiction. And I think that's enough to hold our loved ones struggling with substance use disorders accountable for their substance use disorders, because they chose and made the subsequent decision to engage in substance use. Listen, my favorite podcast is Beating Addiction Podcast on Apple Music. I feel like it's the #1 podcast that educates family and recovery supports on addiction, whether it be the stages of change, whether it be how to support someone struggling with substance use disorder. Because we all know that the main way to support someone struggling with substance use disorders is by getting educated on substance use disorders. By getting educated on substance use disorders as a disease and brain disease and a family disease rather than it being a choice. Our goal is to minimize the stigma of addiction. People always say, what choice outside of using do those who struggle with substance use do have? And my message for those who are struggling with substance use is, although addiction may not be a choice, using is. And today, you do have two choices to consider. You can give up one thing to gain everything, or you can lose everything.